It's time for a movie review with It's the Real Najwa. We're going to be talking about the F1 movie, guys. It was actually pretty amazing. So I want to say there was a couple weeks back where my husband and I, we went to see it, and I really wanted to do a review. I thought it was wonderful. I mean, come on, it's got Brad Pitt, 1990s dreamy guy, so it can't really get better than that. So Brad Pitt, he played Sonny Hayes, and then there's Damson Idris, he played Joshua Pierce, who's actually, he's actually an English actor. So there's a lot of things I want to talk about this movie. I want to talk about some of the parallels with real life. So it is, first of all, I have to caveat to say, I really didn't start getting into Formula One until I met my husband, then boyfriend, because he's a huge Formula One fan. And so just by the normal law of transference, I also watch a lot of Formula One now, because if it's on the TV in the house, I'm going to see it. And I actually think it's pretty good. So I've developed a bit of a like for it. So I've grown an appreciation for it. We'll just say that, but I have to caveat this review and say that I am a novice to Formula One. So that's just the caveat. And you know, actually, I noticed when we were in the movie theater, it was mostly couples. It was mostly what looked like married people, boyfriend, girlfriend. So I imagine there's a lot of wives clubs of Formula One. It was the men who probably had the root, you know, original interest in it, and then the wives. So basically, let's get into the plot. So we have Brad Pitt, 1990s dream guy, and the English actor, he plays sort of a scrappy young come-up. He's kind of arrogant, he's kind of boastful. And you have Kate McKenna, she actually plays one of the technicians. And then you have Javier Bardem, he's the owner of the team. And he plays the owner of the team, who's Ruben Cervantes. And basically that's the basic cast. Now, you also have some cameos from actual F1 drivers. I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying players because I'm usually talking about football with my brothers, and it's driving with my husband, and so he's always like, it's not a game, it's a race. It's not players, it's drivers. So anyway, so you actually see some F1 drivers. Obviously, you have Max Verstappen, who is like F1 dream kid. You also have Lewis Hamilton, Fernando, Alonso, Sergio, Perez, George Russell, Lando, Norris. I like Lando, Norris. And then there's also, you know, probably some of the commentators, maybe that we don't know by, you know, name, that was in the credits. This is just from what I Googled, but maybe there were some other people from the Formula One sort of sphere that were also featured in the movie. Now, some of the other drivers I don't know about as much. There was Esteban Ocon, I don't know how you pronounce that. There was also Daniel Ricciardo, there was Pierre Gasly, and there was someone, Valtteri Bottas. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names. And then there was also, I think, Yuki Tsunoda? I think that's how you pronounce it. And I always like hearing his name when the commentators like say it across, you know, the actual races and stuff. So again, I am a novice, so I'm sorry if looking pretty green here. But as someone who has been introduced to this universe, I thought that the story was really, really nice. It had this sort of feel. It felt really real. It felt like you were really immersed in everything, from a combination of the plot, a combination of the camera angles, and I can really feel the momentum of being in that F1 space, of being around these cars that are speeding by, you know, and a combination with the music and the angles and the cinematography. I think that the movie did a really good job of just feeling like you were immersed in this, especially being in a movie theater. So the screen is really big, so it really feels like you're immersed. So like, I felt like this movie was a 9 out of 10. I also feel like this movie has like a social impact that I'm going to get into a little bit later. So, plot. You have the main character, Sonny, who's played by Brad Pitt. So the character played by Brad Pitt, without trying to give too much away, is like, you know, he is a driver. When you first see the movie, you know, okay, first of all, Brad Pitt, he's still dream guy. You know, it's not the 1990s. He's not 18, 25 years old anymore. But, you know, he's gotten older. He's got kids. but he's still got that spark. And that's sort of a parallel with the character. So the character, Sonny, he seems kind of like a rogue, you know. We start on this dramatic scene, and I think the movie's playing a Whole Lot of Love by Led Zeppelin. It looks like we're at a NASCAR race, and Sonny, played by Brad Pitt, is just like walking onto the scene, and he's going to get in the car, and he drives this race. It's really dramatic, and you know, the whole time this Led Zeppelin song is playing really loud, and the angles from the camera are just amazing, combined with the speed of the cars, you know, sort of the organic shape of the way that the cars go around this route, and you know, the angles and everything. It feels like I said, you're immersed in it, so it feels really good. And he does this really great race, and then there's a trophy, you know, the team leader who's trying to hand a trophy to him at the end. And he's like, you know, we're pumped up on this all adrenaline. He's like, are you going to stay back with the team? And he's like, no. He gets up in this, you know, this beat up van, and, you know, he seems like some sort of hippie. So we get the idea that, you know, he's sort of this transient guy, and we're like, okay, so he just won this race, but he's also kind of older, even though he looks like he's got that spark. He's kind of an older guy, and like, you know, what's going on here? So basically, we get the idea that he's very, very skilled at what he does. You can tell he's really skilled. And so at the beginning of the movie, we see that there's, I don't know, maybe he has like an injury or something. It's kind of like, you know, not really put in your face, but you get the idea that maybe something went on in his past. Again, without trying to give too much away of the movie. And then, you know, we find out more about his old days later on. So apparently back in the 90s, he was a Formula One driver, and he had a friend back then who was also a driver. And here in the present, they meet up in the laundromat, you know. And this friend basically is the owner of the team. This is Ruben. And he's, you know, as someone who's seen the actual Formula One team owners, they get the vibe of very important people. Like, they brush elbows with really important people. Like, these are important guys. But the character Ruben actually seems really, really down to earth, and he owns a team called Apex GP. And basically he tells his old friend Sonny, like, my team is in trouble. We are millions in the red. I've got this new rookie driver who's got a lot of potential, but you know, he's really arrogant, and he's not really a team player, and you know, we don't have an amazing car, but we need you, man, you know, like, we need you. So he basically gives Sonny his spiel, and Sonny's like, oh, okay, well, you know, like, I really am on the go all the time. I don't stick to one thing. It seems like his friend really wants him to be locked into the Formula One, but he's like, I don't really do that. And then you got Joshua Pierce. So this is the actual driver on the Apex GPX team. And he's a British actor, like the actor who plays him, but you get the idea that the character comes from probably like a working class, middle class background. He seems like his parents, maybe they're immigrants, like his mom is in there, his best friend is in there. His mom seems like maybe she's got a hint of like a Nigerian or Jamaican accent or whatever, but he's like really pumped up all the time. He's always like trying to get the Instagram photos and be at the right places and all this stuff. He's really full of himself. So you get the idea that he's either like nouveau riche or new money or whatever that is. He's really, really arrogant, okay? So you've got, you know, Sonny on the other hand, who is just kind of like stuck in the 90s, and he's also got this gigantic chip on his shoulder. So actually, you know, at the same time, he's got this sort of laissez-faire thing. He's got this kind of like, oh, I'm gonna go with the breeze or whatever. So you kind of sort of see the exterior image of Joshua. You know, Joshua sees right through the image of that, you know, and they kind of have this back and forth rapport, and they kind of, you know, start competing against each other, but they also start helping each other. You know, they kind of like see two different perspectives that each of them can kind of give to the other to help them. So, you know, Formula One driving, I can imagine how, you know, each team I think has at least 2 drivers on the team. And so I guess there is kind of this weird parallel where, like, you know, they're both competing with each other, you know, in a way, in a sense, even though they're teammates, but also the teammates are competing against these other teams. So I guess that can kind of leave you with this sort of, you know, mixed goals, if you will. So I thought that that was a really interesting way to go through this journey, you know, to show that dichotomy. And, you know, Sonny, he develops his character as well, because although he does sort of stay this sort of transient, you know, driving, loving hippie or whatever throughout the whole movie, he learns something about himself through Joshua. And he also gives Joshua this help as well, you know, because Joshua's got this whole arrogant thing. So, and arrogant without following up, right? You know, because he's got great potential. He could be a great driver, but he's just missing out on some things. And Sonny helps him get to that place. You know, they help each other. And so I think that this movie also shows like the possibilities, you know, because, you know, Formula One is a very, very white sport, you know, and, you know, Lewis Hamilton, I think, shows that there is a possibility to bring more diversity. But even Lewis Hamilton, he's black, but he's mixed race, you know. It's not the same. In Formula One, you don't see the same diversity as you would in, say, basketball or American football or even European football, soccer, however you want to call it. So what I was talking about on that social level a bit earlier, I think that you're really making a statement, you know, to have a dark-skinned black brother play this lead role. You know, it's basically, I would love for them to put an American dark-skinned black brother. Like that, I feel like that is the downfall of a lot of movies. You often see when they really do finally give a little bit of representation and pull the colorism out of it, you know, and they give that chance to dark-skinned black men or black women or whatever. But usually it's black men where they do this. They put in a British actor. So I would have loved if that would have been an American actor. But hey, you know, I'm not really putting it down or anything. But I do think that choice basically was giving sort of F1 like a wink, wink, nod, nod, you know, that, you know, not only can they bring maybe diversity into this, but they can give more Americans a shot. I think that Sonny is supposed to represent America. You know, he starts off with this NASCAR and, you know, he's coming to Formula One, even though he had drove before or whatever. And you don't see an actual F1, you don't see a lot of representations either from, you know, black people from America or America. So I think that that was a sort of wink, wink, nod, nod, you know, maybe you guys can invest in that diversity to bring it back to a bigger audience. So I thought that that was really cool. I also just generally, you know, pulling race out of it and all that stuff, I really just think the plot of the movie was really strong. I think it taught us something. It taught us something about how you can't be too old to learn something new, and you can't be too young to listen to your elders and get something from them of wisdom. You know, even from different socioeconomic or racial or cultural backgrounds, you know, we can all add in things. I even remember the character Sonny and the technician who he develops a romantic interest for. I think she was Scottish or maybe British or something like that. And it just shows, like, also within Formula One, within the space, how it is such a melting pot of all of these different cultures and nationalities. You know, you have the influence from, you know, Saudi Arabia, and you have the influence from the UK, you have the influence from France, from Montenegro, from Italy, from Mexico, from even the US. So it was really, really interesting to watch. I really, really love the plot. Again, I would say 9 out of 10. Even as someone who is a novice to Formula One, I really could keep up with the plot. I really could keep up with even the nuances of the sport of racing, of Formula One racing. And all in all, I just thought that it was shot really nicely. You know, it was entertaining. It also could be emotional at times. It spoke to some things, some structures, social structures, you know, within our modern lives. It was real, but it was, you know, it was heartwarming, but it was action worthy. I mean, I thought that it was really, really good. So I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. See you next time. Bye.